Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Betsy Bohan and I love to create videos of faith to help you on your journey all the way home to heaven. Today we're going to be examining the real Jesus, and I'm going to be using it as compared to an old TV game show in the United States back in the mid-50s, 1950s to I think about 1979, called To Tell the Truth. So I hope you'll stick with me and stay all the way to the end, because I wouldn't want you to miss a thing. And so here we go. The game To Tell the Truth was around from the mid-1950s to about 1979. And what the game entailed was it had a host or an announcer and then a panel of guests that would play the game. And then they had these guests that were to be this main character. Now say, for example, the main character would be Sally Jones. Well, you would have Sally, but then you would have two imposters that weren't Sally. And they would all sit behind this little, desk-like thing. And the announcer or host would ask, "What is your name, please?" And number one would stand up and say, "My name is Sally Jones." Number two would stand up and say, "My name is Sally Jones." And number three would stand up and say, "My name is Sally Jones." And they would sit down. And then the panelist would be able to ask questions. They would be given a time and a certain number of questions that they could ask each of these people that all claimed to be Sally Jones. Now, from their answers then, they would determine who did they think the real Sally Jones was. So at the end of time, they would have to mark number 1, 2, or 3. Which one did they think was the real Sally Jones? And so they did that. Then they put their cards down, and the host would say, "Would the real Sally Jones please stand up?" And so they would kind of playfully, one or the other, stand up until the real one would finally stand up and say, "I'm the real Sally Jones." And then those who got the right answer would get their rewards, which at that time was monetary rewards. And I was thinking, what if we did that with Jesus? What would that look like? I mean, first off, in my mind, looking back over the centuries and even now, we would have like the real Jesus of Christ born in Bethlehem, carpenter in Nazareth, crucified, died, buried, rose. We would have him, but then we would have like not just two imposters, like many, many imposters of Jesus. And so there would be a lot of people that we would have to question. Secondly, they would be the same questions that have been asked since Jesus came to earth. It would be like probably not any real fresh questions. They would be the same repeated question asked about Jesus since he first came. Are you really the Son of God? Who are you? What are you here to do? What's your purpose? What do you have to do with me? All these same questions that began when he was on earth and began his ministry, all the way to today. And because we still ask those questions, well, how would we even figure out who the real Jesus is? Especially since now we don't just have two imposters, we have all these imposters. I mean, so many religions will claim Jesus is this, and Jesus is that, and Jesus is this, and oh, Jesus is this great spirit, or Jesus didn't even come in flesh. Jesus was here, but no, he didn't die on a cross. All these different versions of Jesus, right? So how can we tell the truth? Well, one thing that we know from the game To Tell the Truth was that the person who truly was Sally Jones could not lie. She had to answer the questions truthfully, while the others actually made up stories and made up things to persuade the others to choose them instead of the real Sally Jones. And it wasn't until after they made their choice at the end, when they were allowed to say their real names, who they really were, and what their real occupation was. So, if that was the case, oh my goodness, right? I think we'd be waiting till the end of when we die, and then after that we find, oh, was that the real Jesus? Did Jesus really matter? Oh my goodness, I thought that was Jesus. No, it wasn't. I thought he didn't matter. No. So how can we tell who Jesus is? Well, number one, in all these different things where people say Jesus is this and Jesus is that, look at the fruit of what that Jesus accomplishes. And furthermore, look at what the real Jesus was like, that was recorded in the Gospels, in the Bible. So many people think that the Bible is just, and it's not like just a sacred text, because the Word of God is alive and powerful. It is a holy book, but it's also a historical book. And the Gospels are eyewitness accounts, first-hand accounts, or near accounts of Jesus when he was on this earth. And the one thing that we could notice was Jesus was always a good man. He was always doing good. Now what's interesting is that across so many philosophies and spiritualities and various religions, Jesus is seen as a good teacher, a good man, a this, a that, but not what he proclaimed himself as, right? So you have all these imposters saying this is what Jesus is and this is what Jesus is, just like the two Sally Joneses that were imposters, who were made up stories and made up things to mislead the panelists to believe that they were the real Sally Jones, when indeed they weren't, and actually had no knowledge other than the name and a few scant things of who Sally Jones was. Another very important thing is we need to know, what did Jesus say about himself? Because what he said about himself was the truth. What did Jesus say? He said he was both Son of God and Son of Man. That means he was fully God and fully man. And he said that he came to take away the sins of the world, that he came to redeem mankind who was on their path to eternal destruction unless he came to redeem us from their sins. Now, some of that may not make sense to some of you, but I tell you, if you read the Bible and ask God, true God, to direct you and help you to understand who the real Jesus is, he will. I want to read a verse that John wrote, actually a couple of them, in the Bible. And John was one of the closest, he was in the inner three closest disciples of Jesus, and he referred to himself as a disciple whom Jesus loved. So not that Jesus didn't love the others, but he absolutely knew the love of God, of Jesus and God. And he said, now this, he writes about him in the gospel, but then he also wrote an epistle. An epistle basically means a letter to the church, a letter to specific people. Now he's writing to believers, and here's what he says about false Jesuses, false spirits, those who are not truly Jesus Christ. He puts in 1 John 4, 1 through 3, Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is of God, And every spirit that does not confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is not of God. And this is the spirit of Antichrist, which you have heard was coming and is already now in the world, meaning it's against Christ. That spirit, Antichrist, is in the world, but it also comes and reveals itself through various false prophets, false beliefs, and things like that. He also says again, because this is so important, in 2 John, so still part of that epistle, 2 John chapter 1, it only has one chapter, verses 7 through 8. For many deceivers have gone out into the world who do not confess Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. This is a deceiver and an antichrist. Look to yourselves that we do not lose those things we work for, but that we may receive a full reward. Remember, dear ones, many spiritualities, many philosophies will say Jesus was a good man. But remember this, good men, truly good men, do not lie. And most assuredly, they do not lie on a repeated basis. Jesus said many times that he was the Son of God, that he and his Father were one, that he had come to lay down his life for the sheep, to redeem us from our sin, to restore a relationship with God. This is what Jesus said. So if he was a good man, then he can't be a liar. He must be the real Jesus Christ. And here's another thing. Instead of saying, will the real Jesus Christ stand? We will say, will the real Jesus Christ rise from the dead? For only the real Jesus Christ, fully God, fully man, sinless, could rise from the death after that terrible crucifixion and being in the tomb for 3 days. Only a true God, a real God, could rise. And not only did he rise from the dead on the 3rd day, but remember, beloved, he was seen by over 500 people. In the 40 days, he still was on earth until he ascended to heaven in front of the eyes of his disciples and is now at the right hand of God, interceding for the saints. And there you have it, another fairly short but very pertinent video on who is the real Jesus. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I do want to invite you to watch my short videos, one on Saturday and then a verse and a prayer on Sunday. And until next weekend, bye and be blessed.